Hey everybody! Once again I'm going to be analyzing the newest Deep Rock Galactic weapons and coming up with some possible builds for them. This time we're going to be taking a look at the Engineer's Smart Rifle. Hopefully this time the background music is quiet enough so you can actually hear me. I apologize for that, by the way. I admit that I was rushing through my last video a bit. I'm going to be taking this one a little bit slower, so hopefully it's in a bit better condition. But enough about apologies, let's get right into it. Be sure to leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of the weapon and any builds that you can think of. And give this video a like if you really like it, and subscribe if you want to see more. Well, you know the drill by now. We're going to be kicking things off with Tier 1 of the mods. Here we've got increased caliber rounds, which increases damage, and expanded ammo bags, which gives you more ammo capacity. Pretty boring, but also a pretty basic start off for most builds. In Tier 2 we finally get into the more interesting upgrades. We start off with Macro Lens. This decreases the width of the lock-on area in exchange for a longer range. Seems good for keeping your distance from bugs. Honestly, I have to say that this one is a bit confusing in how it's described. Hopefully it'll get a better description before release. Then there's the Ccd Array Add-On. This gives the lock-on a wider angle and expands the angle that new targets can be acquired. Seems like a good idea for crowd control as your goal. Lastly, for Tier 2 we have the Zoom Lens. This increases the range of the lock-on. Honestly, I'm not really sure what the point of this mod is, since Macro Lens seems to already have this covered and it actually does a better job than this one does. It might be better if you want more range without having to lose out on the lock-on area size. Moving right along to Tier 3, we have Electrochemical Rounds. This gives you bonus damage to burning and electrified bugs. It seems like it'll make you more of a team player so long as you plan ahead. Now let's take a look at the Smart Targeting Software, or SMRT Targeting Software, I don't know how you pronounce that. Regardless of how it's supposed to be pronounced, this means that the lock-on will now prioritize low health enemies. This seems really good if you want to maximize your efficiency in combat. Then we've got Piercing Rounds, a pretty standard upgrade that's shared by a lot of different weapons. It allows bullets to penetrate through targets. It's a really good crowd control option. Next up to bat is Tier 4. Let's see what it's got to offer. Looks like it's going to be starting off with Shutter Speed Sensor. This reduces the time between lock-ons. This seems like another really good choice for crowd control. It makes it easier to react quickly to large swarms of bugs. Then we've got Aperture Extension. This increases the amount of lock-ons you can place on a single target. This looks great for taking out a larger threat. Just pump them full of lead. Just like that, we're already on to the final tier, Tier 5. This one kicks off with the Electricity Generator mod. This makes it so that targets with 3 locks on them are electrocuted when shot. Seems like it'd be a great combo with the electrochemical rounds. Then there's Unstable Lock Mechanism. The full lock-on adds 20% damage to all shots. This is another really good choice for crowd control. Maxing out your locks will boost the damage, a perfect way to tear apart a swarm. And the last mod we're going to take a look at today, High Frequency Bullet. This makes it so that the full lock will scare enemies. Good for keeping those big swarms away from you. If you're in a pinch, this might just save your beard. I gotta say, I'm still a bit confused as to how this weapon works, but those do seem like pretty interesting mods. Let's check out the overclocks and wrap this up. For the clean overclocks, we've got Eraser. This gives you more target locks and an expanded magazine capacity. Great for crowd control without the downsides that other overclocks might have. Then there's the Armor Break module. This gives you higher damage against armor when all locks are engaged. Honestly, this one kinda just sucks. First of all, you have to get all locks engaged, and second of all, armor breaking isn't really worth taking up an entire overclock slot. Hopefully this will get a buff before release. Then we've got the balanced overclocks. First up is Seeker Rounds. Locked shots will always hit their target and ignore armor. Plus, the locks are maintained for a wider angle. This does come with 2 downsides. The burst rate of fire is reduced and the reload speed is decreased. This does seem pretty good though, and honestly just like a better version of Armor Break module since it ignores armor altogether. This seems like it might be the go-to default overclock. Then there's Explosive Chemical Rounds. The last shot of your gun triggers an explosion in enemies with more than 3 locks on them, but it also lowers your damage and ammo. This seems great for AoE, and it might be the keystone to a crowd control build. And finally, we take a look at the unstable overclocks. First up is Nero Lasso. Targets with a lock on them are slowed, but the lock now has a time limit, targets are acquired slower, and the max number of locks is lowered as well. This seems like it could be good for weakening priority targets so your team can take them out easier. And I think this final overclock is the perfect one to end things on, Executioner. This gives you a massive weak point damage increase when all locks are engaged and gives you very fast lock acquisition. But it will also reduce the maximum locks as well as the magazine and ammo capacity. This might be good for crowd control, but it could also work well for taking out larger bugs if you play your cards right. Well, That's it for the mods and overclocks. Honestly, this weapon was really surprising. One thing that caught me off guard was how there was no mod or overclock that interacted with the turrets in any way. Both of Engineer's other primaries have some sort of interaction with the turrets, but this just doesn't have any. I also have to say I'm a bit disappointed because a lot of these mods seem really weak or very poorly explained. Thankfully, there's still plenty of time before the update comes out, and most of the changes that need to be made are just minor tweaks to the weapon, except for that one armor breaking overclock. I don't know what they were thinking with that one. But enough about all that, let's get to some possible builds. The first build I had in mind was Tier 1B, Tier 2C, Tier 3C, Tier 4A, Tier 5B, with the Executioner or Eraser overclocks. My goal here was to create a pretty basic AoE build. I think that mods like Zoom Lens are going to be really good for AoE since it increases how many bugs are within your effective range, and I also think that mods like Shutter Speed Sensor are really good for this since it basically makes it faster for you to lock onto a larger swarm of bugs. I think the Eraser overclock pairs perfectly well with this playstyle since it encourages you to have as many locks as possible at once, and if you're going to be fighting large swarms, that's exactly what you're going to want to be doing. Of course, I threw in the Eraser overclock as well because it allows you to target more bugs, which can allow you to target larger swarms overall. For my next build, I went with Tier 1A, Tier 2B, and Tier 3, 4, and 5A, with the Nero Lasso or Explosive Chemical Rounds overclock. My goal here was to make an elemental build, as you can probably tell from the combo of Electricity Generator mod and Electrochemical Rounds. I also thought this would be a great build to try out Nero Lasso on, since it gives you a bit more space to work with when you're trying to apply elemental effects to an enemy. I also wanted to try out Explosive Chemical Rounds because it's awesome, and I don't think I need to give any further reason. And finally, I tried to create a single target damage build with Tier 1A, Tier 2A, Tier 3B, Tier 4B, and Tier 5A with the Seeker Rounds, or maybe Armor Break if it gets buffed, probably, maybe. With this build, I tried to focus a bit on getting some distance between you and an enemy, since you typically don't want to be right up in a big bug's face. Of course, I think that other builds that are more aggressive could work, but I just went with something a bit more defensive here. Honestly, this video has been the hardest to work on so far, purely because this weapon is just so strange and I still don't really understand it yet. If any of you can figure this thing out better than I can, please leave a comment below as I already said before. Well, that's all I got for now. I'm sorry about the delay, I had a lot of stuff going on, and like I mentioned, this video was really difficult for me to work on. Fortunately, or I guess unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the update has been delayed, so it means I'm going to have some more time to work on these videos. I'm going to try and be a bit quicker on the video about the final weapon, but we'll see. So thank you very much for watching, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you all next time.